I'm Mark Dresner, and this is Inside Clinical, a special interview series featuring experts and leaders at the forefront of drug development, clinical research, trials, and operations. Inside Clinical is brought to you by the Partnerships in Clinical Trials Conference, where clinical decision makers meet to innovate, foster relationships, and accelerate science, now approaching its 23rd year. Joining us today is Coleen Glessner. She's the Vice President and Head of Clinical Trial Process and Quality for Pfizer. Coleen, welcome to Inside Clinical.
Thanks, Mark.
It's a pleasure to have you. As your title suggests, you're very focused on quality in clinical research, particularly trials, obviously. What does this may seem like a no-brainer, but what does it say about the state of clinical trials, and why is this important? Why is quality as a focus important?
Yeah, Mark, that's a great point. If I step back and think about quality and the journey at Pfizer, I immediately go back to 2010, where Pfizer received a warning letter for the conduct of clinical trials in GCP. It was a difficult day for Pfizer. It was difficult information to receive.
Yeah.
But what it did is it started a burning platform for the entire company, focused on how to assure that there's quality in every single clinical trial, and more importantly, in the mindset of every single colleague who touches clinical trials. At Pfizer, that's over 10,000 people. We knew we had our work cut out for us, and we started to look at our processes. We started to look at our metrics. We started to look at our output. And then we stepped back and we thought, what's missing? And it's the people component, the culture. One of the core tenets of assuring success. You have people, process, technology, but you have to wrap it all together with culture. If people don't believe in their hearts that everything they do every day must deliver quality to assure patient safety, data integrity, and protocol adherence, you're never going to move the needle. So we actually undertook a 3-year initiative that continues today, because frankly, quality is a journey that isn't going to stop. We absolutely started to focus on the culture. How do you really empower people at all levels, from vice president to colleague in the trenches, monitoring the trial, cleaning the data, working on the statistical programming? How do you empower them to make the right decisions?
Partnering with CROs, is obviously key. To what extent, generally speaking, have CROs been able to effectively make the case for quality?
Yeah. You know, Mark, that's a great question. So much of how the industry gets clinical trials done now requires partnerships with CROs. We need them for the resources, for the expertise to execute operationally. So that's absolutely key. In my experience to date, it's very rare that a CRO will lead with quality as a differentiator. I can tell you with where we are at Pfizer right now, that's absolutely essential for us to assure success. I also think it's starting to become more and more prevalent in the industry. We've seen increased number of warning letters. We've seen increased number of scrutiny and findings from all of the agencies on clinical trials. Every single sponsor is stepping up to really assure that there's a sustainable quality management system. What that requires when we do any kind of partnering with a CRO is that the CRO has the exact same philosophy and ideology and will drive it through their core company. I just talked to you about getting to every single person on the ground who executes the work, knowing they have the ability to make the right decisions to assure quality. For the sponsors to be comfortable going to bed at night, assuring that patient safety is foremost, we must assure that we select CROs who view quality as a differentiating competitive edge.
Do you find that there is the same cultural challenge that you initially were facing among partners when you're looking at CROs in general?
You know, that depends. I think different CROs have had different level of exposure to this kind of regulatory scrutiny and have had to react in different capacities along the way. What's really interesting is to compare companies who have had a burning platform because they've been exposed to companies that have not been exposed but have had to try to drive to assure that they're building quality into all their deliverables.
Right, right. Why is it important for a CRO to make a case for quality when you're considering vetting potential partners, and what can they do to make that case for you?
That's a great question. So if I step back and think about the way clinical trials work, regardless, the sponsor remains accountable. We can delegate authority, we can delegate responsibility, we can delegate actions. We can never delegate accountability. The sponsor remains accountable for the delivery of the clinical trial, that it meets GCP regulations, that standards are met, that it has appropriate quality. We can never, ever give that up. When you start to outsource your clinical trial, at Pfizer, we have a portfolio of well over 500 active trials at any given time. The bulk of those are outsourced for operational effectiveness. You need a partner that views quality as much as you do. You want a partner who's going to say, I've got your back. By the way, these are the processes that we've put in place to assure that we have appropriate controls. We will control the quality in our trials, and we will deliver to you the output so that you can appropriately oversee it.
Culture, compliance, and quality. So when you're talking about this culture of quality, there's also obviously a regulatory compliance issue. What's the difference between the two?
Great question. It's something that we talk about all the time, and I notice that many people use quality and compliance interchangeably, and you can certainly understand why they would.
Right.
Compliance, however, you need to step back and think it's about assuring adherence to regulations and regulatory requirements, and being able to demonstrate that you've done what's in the regulations. However, quality can be so much more. Those compliance regulations, they're table stakes. They are a must. It's like turning the lights on. As long as it's working, you take it for granted. We need to be in that place that compliance works, and it is the baseline and foundation. Quality, however, is often far more ethereal. It's hard to identify, but you know it when you see it. You walk into a room, you look at two things, and you immediately know which one is quality. But it might be more difficult to actually tangibly pull out what it is. And I think that's why you see so many venues in the industry right now trying to identify that. You see Avoca focusing on quality agreements and quality metrics. You see the Metrics Consortium coming up with what matters most in clinical trials. Really defining quality, not easy. Your customers have a key in defining quality. You're driving for continuous improvement. You're driving to make it better, constantly striving to get to that almost nirvana. That's quality when I step back and think about it. Compliance must do table stakes. As an industry, what we need to do is assure that we're able to build that compliance piece in and then really strive to drive towards quality.
Outstanding point of view, and something definitely that the industry is clearly, as you pointed out, focusing on. But I think that you mentioned the word ethereal, and I think that kind of sums it up. You know, how do you actually turn this into something you can quantify, you know?
Yeah. You know, that's actually a great question. We spend a significant amount of time on the cultural aspects at Pfizer so that we can assure that we put something in place that's evergreen, that doesn't change. You can have all of the SOPs, the processes, the systems, the training in place, but without having each individual with the tools at their hands to make the best decision, you'll never attain that sustainability. So we actually right now are working, and we're in the process of coming up with a tool to measure, to assess where are we on the maturity index to establishing quality within our model.
That's fantastic. Coleen, I want to thank you very much for your insights today and your candor. You've given us a lot to think about, and it's been very informative. I really appreciate you joining us.
It was a pleasure. Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, good to have you. And that concludes this episode of Inside Clinical. I'm Mark Dresner. Thanks for tuning in.